We'll do a review in Likutei Sichos in Chelik Chof Tes, volume 29. This is the Sicha for Hoshana Raba. Of course, in Hoshana Raba, we have the special mitzvah of Arovis, but nowadays it's done differently than it was done in the time of the Beis Hamikdash. There'll be a discussion, but the bottom line is we have the Arove the way it's part of the bundle together with the other three species, with the lulav, the hadassim, and the esrig, and then you have the arava, all four. But the arava on Hoshana Rabbah is on the Rava by itself. The Rebbe will point out, and based on a word of the previous Rebbe, the uniqueness of the arava, that its unity and the reason for its actually greatness consists in the fact that it's just a standalone arava, a level of bittul, as the Rebbe will explain the sicha, and we'll go step by step. Sicha is learned the Lunishmas, our beloved son, Harav Levi Yitzchok ben Rav Chaim Tzvi, who was taken away at a young age. Tehei Nishmasei Tzrura B'Tzreir HaChaim. May the learning be to benefit his soul. So we'll learn Kasai, go step by step. Hoshana Rabbah, Aleph. Für die Inyonim in welcher Hoshana Rabbah is ausgeteilt von the andere Yemei HaSukkos. The Rebbe is going to talk about some matters in which Hoshana Rabbah is distinguished of the other days of Sukkos. Eventually, it boils down to the Arovis. We'll see in the Beis Hamikdash there used to be a little bit of a different process than what we have today, and we'll see how important the mitzvah of Arava is, that in order to make sure that we can do the mitzvah of Arava and Hoshana Rabbah, they set it up that when the time they used to set up the schedule of the month, they didn't want Hoshana Rabbah to come on Shabbos so as not to interfere, as we'll see in the Sirah. But first, let's just see what are the matters in which Hoshana Rabbah is distinguished from the other days of Sukkot. The Torah says 7 days you should sit in the Sukkah, Smachton Fnei Hashem Lekechem, 7 days. But the seventh day, which is called the Hoshana Rabbah, how is it different the other days of Sukkot? So the Rebbe brings down 2 points. Aleph, number one, B'chol Yimei HaSukkos hat memakev given the Mizbeach blois ein mo. All days of Sukkot, they circled the Mizbeach only once. And that's actually what we do today. We circle the Bima. We don't have the Beis we don't have the Mizbeach over here, but we're circling the Bima every day of the Sukkot days. We circle it one time. But on Hoshana Rabbah, they circled the Mizbeach Siman Mol in the Beis Hamikdash. When we had the Beis Hamikdash, they would circle it 7 times. So that was one thing that was unique to Hoshana Rabbah. And then there was another thing which has to do with the Arava, with the willow. Base. B'chol Yemei HaChag, they would is kivas arova b'tzida mizbeach. They would put up the willows, raise it up on the sides of the mizbeach. They would raise up these willows. Given norves is chal be'echad b'sheish yimei hachol. They only did it if it was a weekday. So the willows were raised over the mizbeach every day, only if it was a weekday. If one of the days was not a weekday, was a Shabbos, then they didn't do it. Chal Yom Shabbos, given Norves is Chal Be'echad B'Sheish V'Achol, only when it comes out during the weekday. The Mishnah says, what happens, Chal Yom HaShabbos Liyaz B'Toich HaChag, if Shabbos is in the middle of the Yom Tov of Sukkot, so one of the days, so they wouldn't raise the Arava on Shabbos, they wouldn't do it. Ein zokt v'n Arava elim kain, but sometimes they would do it on Shabbos also. Elim kain chal yom shvi liyos b'Shabbos. Unless you have the 7th day, Hoshana Rabbah, comes on Shabbos, then we would raise the Arava even on Shabbos. The rest of the week, the rest of the days of Sukkot would only raise it if it was a weekday. But on the seventh day of Sukkot, Shina Raba of Sukkot, they would raise it even if it comes out on Shabbos. Why was it so important to do it even on Shabbos? To publicize that this is a mitzvah. But when did we do this publicizing it's a mitzvah? Only if the last day is Shabbos. That's when we raise the arova even on Shabbos. But if one of the other days of Sukkot was on Shabbos, then we didn't do it. This was in the time of the Beis Hamikdash. There was a mizbeach there, and they used to raise the arovas, and the arova was raised every 7 days, but only on the other days, only when it didn't come on Shabbos, unless Hoshana Raba, they raised the arovas even on Shabbos, if Shabbos was Hoshana Raba. Das Alzi Bisman Hamikdash, this is all in the time of the Beis Hamikdash. So Bisman Hazeh Ober, in nowadays, so over there we see the difference of Hoshana Raba. Number one, there's only, the week was 7 hakofes, here was 1 hakofes, was 7, Hoshana Raba was 7 hakofes, all the other day was 1 hakofes around the Mizbech. And number two, that no matter what, on Hoshana Raba, they raised the Aravis, whether it was Shabbos or not, they always did it. As opposed to the other days, they only did it when it was not on Shabbos. So you have a difference that Hoshana Raba, you raise the Arava even on Shabbos. Now, that was in the time of the Beis Hamikdash. Das Alts is Bisman Hamikdash, they circle the Mizbeach. Bisman Hazel, in our day, there's no Beis Hamikdash. So then the halacha is that ein neitlin oisa de arava kol shivas yimei hachag zecher lemigdash. We don't take it at all. We don't make a remembrance of the migdash to use aravis. We don't use the aravis, this special arav. We use in the lulav. That's a different mitzvah. But we're talking about to doing a separate thing with aravis. We don't do it. Elo b'yoyim hashvi bilvad. Only on the 7th day is when we do Hoshana Raba, we do the Aravis over there. That's when we take it, and nowadays, that's when we take it. That's the language of the Ramba. Das heißt, which means, as in the Friedriki, Sukkot is Bechlal Nitod der Inyan Fun Arava, that in the previous days of Sukkot, there's no Arava, this special din of Arava doesn't exist in nowadays. So either way, in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, that Rava was so important that it overrode the Shabbos. Bisman has said that we don't take that Rava altogether during the rest of the week, but we do take it on Hoshana Raba. We do have Hoshana Raba, we have the Hoshanas, we have the Arava. So that's a distinction between Hoshana Raba again and the rest of Sukkot. Number one, on the Hoshana Raba, you circle 7 times. The rest of the Sukkah is only 1 time. And number two, that Hoshana Raba, the placing in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, placing the Aravas on the side of the Mizbeach overrode Shabbos on Hoshana Raba and not the rest of the week. And Bisman Hazeh, we don't do it at all with the rest of the week. We don't make a amendment only on Hoshana Raba. So we have a special connection to the Aravas. Okay. And we're going to discuss the idea of the Arava, what is the mitzvah of the Arava? That's going to be the discussion. Base. There is an additional matter with which Hoshana Raba is distinguished after this, the Churban. In addition to the fact that that we take the Aravas on the 7th day, is that the Chachamim went through a great deal of trouble to make sure that we will take the Aravas Bisman Hazeh on Hoshana Raba, and they made it in such a way that we never have Hoshana Rabbah come out on Shabbos. Even the time when they would set up the schedule by every year separately without the calendar, but they would make sure, and also now after the calendar, they made sure that, as the Rebbe will say, we don't have Hoshana Rabbah on Shabbos because we want to make sure that we're going to take the Aravis on Hoshana Rabbah. Something of the big chiddush. We made sure, even though, as we'll see, the Rebbe will explain from Tosfos, that we didn't make sure that Rosh Hashanah shouldn't come out, the first day of Rosh Hashanah shouldn't come out on Shabbos. Rosh Hashanah could come out on Shabbos, and then we're going to have a problem with blowing the shofar. No, no. So they allowed that to come out on Shabbos, and you're not going to blow the shofar. But they didn't want Shana Rabbah to come out on Shabbos because then you might not take that Rava. And Taisus asks, isn't the blowing shofar on Rosh Hashanah more important than the Rava and the Shana Rabbah? And Taisus Taki answers that no, this is more important to establish the fact that Hoshana Rabbah, the Aravis, is something very important. As we'll see, the Rebbe will explain. But nevertheless, we see Hoshana Rabbah now has been made, that we made sure that we can always have it on a weekday so that we can do the Aravis. Base. Another additional matter with the Hoshana Rabbah is distinguished after the destruction. We don't have the Beis Hamikdash. Not Medayi given in Kviyus HaChadoshim, that they were specifically precisely the way they set up the months. They did it intentionally, a specific way. As Hoshana Rabbah is only tois fall on Shabbos, they made sure that Hoshana Rabbah should not fall on Shabbos, because then you wouldn't be able to do the Aravis Bisman Hazeh. We would not do the Aravis on Shabbos, even though in the Beis Mizbeach, which was the original mitzvah, but this is only as a commemorative. We wouldn't commemorate it on Shabbos. So they made sure that Hoshana Rabbah should never come out on Shabbos. When they would see that according to the schedule of the month, the day of Arava, Hoshana Rabbah, will come out on Shabbos. So then they would make one of the preceding month an extra day, make it a day of 30 days. So then Hoshana Rabbah should be on Sunday after Shabbos. So they'd make the previous month a mole or month beforehand to make sure that Hoshana Rabbah will be on a Sunday, not on Shabbos. You shouldn't be needing to negate and take away the mitzvah of taking it out of it. In Yerushalmi, as it's written, stated in Yerushalmi. Reb Simon mefakid le'elon de mechashvin. He would command, Reb Simon would command those who made the calculations. Yavun dataychun, pay attention. The loy tavdin, that you shouldn't make loy tkiyosa b'Shabbos, not the first day of Rosh Hashanah on Shabbos, or Rosh Hashanah shouldn't be on Shabbos, the tkiyah should not be on Shabbos. V'loy arbaso b'Shabbato, and not have the Arava on Shabbos, to make sure that we can blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, to make sure we can take the Arava. So make sure ahead of time. However, if you are pressed, you can't accomplish that. V'in ad chaktun, if you are pressed and you have to do one of the two, Avdu Tkiyoso, so make the Tki on Shabbos, make Rosh Hashanah Shabbos, V'loi Tavdun Arvosa, but don't make Arvosa on Shabbos, make that. If you have to, you have no choice, you can't make them both after Shabbos, so make sure that the Arava is after Shabbos and not the Tkiya. Means to say that it was so important to have the Arava. And this is actually true, what actually happened when we made the calendar. When the calendar was made, Rosh Hashanah can fall on Shabbos, and Shana Rabba cannot fall on Shabbos. Na so is euch noch dem. Wenn man hat nicht Mekadosh given al Ria, when they no longer made the month by the Ria, so we had a set calendar. When the Kviyas Chadoshim is al Cheshbon, when the setting up of the month is according to the calculation, is das ausgeteilt beöfen, so it's been distinguished in such a way, separated, as a Shana Rabba falt came only to Shabbos. Shana Rabba can never fall on Shabbos. Never falls on Shabbos. And in order to accomplish that, the Rebbe says that we know the rule, Loi Adu Rosh, that Sunday cannot be Rosh Hashanah. If Sunday was Rosh Hashanah, then Hoshana Rabbah would have been Shabbos, because Sukkot would have been, first day of Sukkot would have been on Shabbos, just like Rosh Hashanah. And then I'm sorry, if Rosh Hashanah was on Sunday, then the first day of Sukkot would have been on Sunday, and then Hoshana Rabbah would have been on Shabbos. So they say the reason for the rule, Loi Adu Rosh, that Aleph, Dalet, Vav, Sunday, Wednesday, Friday. Why can Sunday not be Rosh Hashanah? Is taka because they are Rava. Well, the Kama Day is B'Rishonim, in many, according to some opinions in the Rishonim, is does their Tamar from Klal. This is actually the reason for the rule as Loi Adu Rosh, that Aleph, Dalet, Vav, Sunday, Wednesday, Friday is not Rosh, cannot be Rosh Hashanah. While if Rosh Hashanah v'tchal zayin b'yom Aleph, if Rosh Hashanah would come on Sunday, that the Hoshana Rabbah is found on Shabbos, then the Hoshana Rabbah will come on Shabbos. So you see, the Rebbe says that even when we calculate now, we wanted to make sure that that Hoshana Rabbah is not going to be in Shabbos, so that you can take the Arov. And that's actually the reason why Rosh Hashanah cannot be on Sunday. So here we're so careful that that Hoshana Rabbah should not be on Shabbos, so that it would not interfere with taking the Arove. On Hoshana Rabbah, Afalpi, as Benegeya Shofar v'Lulav, if with regards to the Shofar and the Lulav, that could fall on Shabbos. Loichashina, we don't worry, we can come on Shabbos. The setup is on Shabbos too. Even though the blowing of the shofar on the first day of Rosh Hashanah is from the Torah. So why would the Rabbanon were more concerned that Rava needs to be taken on the Hoshana Rabbah no matter what? What about shofar and Rosh Hashanah? No, that could come out. That was not scheduled. And when it comes out, we're not going to be blowing the shofar. So Tosfos asks, why are you more concerned about Arava, which is only a zeicher, not to waste it and to make sure that we can take it, and we don't care about shofar to go on Rosh Hashanah. We're not going to have a mitzvah Torah. Frek Tosfos, wie kann man das sagen? How can you say so? As Ayoim Arava, on the day of Arava, which is Hoshana Rabbah, the whole thing is to remember the Mikdash, the way is to take the Arava in the time of the Beis HaMikdash and put it by the Mizbeach. So over there, Chai Shinon. So over there, we worry and we're not going to have it on Shabbos so that we can keep up this commemorative event for the time of the Beis HaMikdash, and we're not going to allow for Shabbos to come out on a Hoshana Rabbah. Bahani de Eraisa, and on these, the Eraisa, on the Shofar, on Lulav, we don't care for them to come out on Shabbos, and we're not going to have the Shofar, and we're not going to have the Lulav. And Tosfos entfert. Tosfos says, no, that's not true. As Enochinami, Bahani diksivi behedya, those that are written in the Torah specifically, if you're not going to do them 1 year because it came out on Shabbos, so then they're not going to come to question it in other years. Oh, last year we didn't blow shofar, maybe we shouldn't blow shofar this year either. They're not going to say that because it's a Torah command. Aval Arava, if you're going to skip it 1 year, and it's only the Rabbanon, it's only from the rabbis, then Osi li Pakpukiba, they're going to come to question. They're going to say, oh, maybe we don't really have to do it because here, this year we didn't do it. It was Shabbos, but because it's Midrabanon, we worry more that people will challenge it. Ubilshoin HaPrisha, to use the language that the Prisha on the tour uses, because of the fear that this mitzvah should not be forgotten by the Jewish people, which means if they're not going to do it once, they're not going to do it again. Because it's going to be light that the person, we didn't do it last year. No, it's not such an important mitzvah. Also, they made us strengthening their words more than Torah. So, Lepoel Mamish, we have a reason. Tosha says it's not because of the strictness of Arava that we want to make sure that we do the Arava every time and there's no gap when it's on Shabbos, that we orchestrated it. So, although the reason, according to Tosha, that we just learned is because of the fact that it's Midrabanan, people might take it lenient and we might forget the halacha. So we have to keep it and make sure that it does it. We do it every year, and therefore we orchestrate it that it can't come out on Shabbos. But the bottom line is we see Arava can never be moved. Every year we take the Arava. Shofar, if it's on Shabbos, we don't do it. The Lulav, if it's on Shabbos, we don't do it. But Arava, we do it every year. Why? Because it can't be on Shabbos. So there's something special about Arava. This is what the Nekuda the Rebbe wants to bring down. And the Rebbe wants to explain the Pnimis Inyonim, what is it about Arava, the unique message of the Arava, what it really tells us why we never want to miss that. We want to make sure we have the Arava. Gimel. Alle Inyonim von Torah, Zayin Meduik Betachlis, all areas, aspects of Torah are totally precise, exact. So it means, even though you have reasonings, but the fact is, Arava is done every year. As those gufa was nor zu lieb mitzvah Arava. That did alone, it's only for the mitzvah Arava. Is mema'aber the chodesh, we are making the month, that's in the time when they would still do it al pi hariyah. So we're going to make an extra day. Kedei zu mekayim zayin mitzvah Arava, in order to fulfill the mitzvah Arava. And we don't even do it when we can't for shofar. It's verstandig, dass od die mitzvah hot in sich a inyan meyuchat. It's understood that this mitzvah has in itself something special. Mit welchem sie ist ausgeteilt von the andere mitzvahs, with which it is distinguished from the other mitzvahs. The mitzvah of Arava is special, that we are going to make sure that we're going to do this mitzvah. So what's about the mitzvah of Arava? So with a willow, we do two mitzvahs. We do one mitzvah, which is the lulav, the 4 species. And then we do with the willow, we put it over the mizbeach. Is this like totally two separate? Is it the same Arava, but we do two things with the Arava? Or we do it something totally separate? The Rebbe is going to bring out that there's a uniqueness when it's actually separate. According to that view, there's going to be two possibilities, but according to the view that it's its own, that itself makes it even more unique as being together with the other species, but as a standalone Arava. Let me das verstehen, behagdim abir. We'll understand this by introducing the explanation in dem Geder for mitzvahs Arava B'chlal. The definition, what is the mitzvah? Generally, what is the mitzvah Arava? Was is given a mitzvah b'fnei atzma b'Beis Hamikdash. The Beis Hamikdash was a mitzvah by itself. You shook the lulav, that was one, with the Aravas included. And then separately, you took the Aravas and you put it over the Mizbeach. Oisa the mitzvah arova shebelulav. Besides the mitzvah arova that is together with the lulav when you shake the four species together. Ketzad oisa mitzvasa, and the Rebbe brings down now from the Ramba how was the mitzvah performed. B'chol yom v'yom v'shivas hayom. Every day of the 7 days, they bring bundles of willows, and they would raise them, put down the aravis on the sides of the mizbeach. The top of the aravis were bent. The top of the aravis were bent over the mizbeach. So when you would bring it and you would organize it over the mizbeach, but like these flowers from these willows, put them all around the Mizbeach, and at the time they were arranging it around the Mizbeach, they would stand them up and to organize them. They would do a tkiya through a tkiya. That's the Lashon of the Rambam. So, which means this was a separate mitzvah. That's doing something different than shaking the lulav and ashuk. Now, but how different is it? Those was arova is given abazun the mitzvah farziv. The fact that the arova was a separate mitzvah by itself, can man learn and if we can explain this in two ways. Number one, ados is nor abazun the pula. All it is, it's a separate act. There's an act with the arova together with the lulav. There's a separate act. Abazun the ma'isa hamitzvah mider arova. It's a separate act of the mitzvah, that same arova that is used for the lulav. We do something separate with that arova, those haste. The gather from the arova is the zelber. You have the same definition, the same rules of arova is the zelber, but the arova shebelulav is the same as the arova which is in the lulav. Nor sizdo, noch a mitzvah. Was vergitom with the arova. There's an additional mitzvah that is done with the arova. That's one way of learning. Base. She's not nor a bezunder Maisa mitzvah by them Gavra in Beis Hamikdash. It's not just a separate act of a mitzvah that the person does in the Beis Hamikdash. Nor she's an ander chefza shel arova. It's another arova object. It's not that same object. There was one object arova that goes with the lulav. There's another object arova that goes by the mizbeach. What's the difference if it's the same object, another object? Is the question is whether the same rules apply to both arovas. Einer for the nafkemina shabazel halacha. One of the nafkeminas halacha is loit nershten oifen according to the first way, that it's just another act, darf oiskumen. So it turns out, it needs to turn out as the shiur, arova shebemigdosh, the amount, the size of the arova the migdosh, is the zelber, or is the zelber shiur, is the same measure with the arova shebelulav, is the same measure as the arova, the same stipulations, the same laws, the same measurement as the arova shebelulav. The reason is Val sees the zelber chefzer shel arova by beide mitzvahs. It's the same object arova by two mitzvahs. One is with the lulav, and the other one is by itself. But according to the second possibility, as the chiddush by arova shebemikdash is that what is the novelty by the arova the mikdash? But this is an ander chefzer shel arova. It's a totally different object of an arova. Is yeshloimaras is do achilik by name in the shira harova, so we could say that there's a difference between the arova and the lulav in the measure of the arova. If we should say it's a separate, totally separate. And the Rebbe is going to explain that this can actually be explained in a literal halacha, that for the lulav of the rava, you just need one leaf over there, as opposed to the arava of the lulav. And the Rebbe is going to connect this to two opinions in the Gemara. So based on this, we can say, Adamit is verbunden the machlokes begemara, that which way we learn is connected to the argument in the Gemara. Over there in the Gemara, what's the measure of the Raba in the Mikdash? Tzi zitarf hoben beis badei olin lachim. Do you need 2 sticks of moist leaves? Al derech v'de arova shebelulav. That will be similar to the arova and the lulav. The arova and the lulav has 2 sticks, as base badit, 2 sticks. So the arova of the mikdash needs 2 sticks also. Others sees by genuga filu ela echad bevad echad. Or maybe over there it's sufficient, even if you have 1 leaf and there's no bunch of olin lachin, there's just 1 ola. Ola echad bevad echad. So it's whether it has the same shear as it part, same chefza, but a different expression, whether it's like the first way or it's a totally different mitzvah. We say to Mizum, more than this, the Rambam Paskin, the Rambam rules, halacha l'Moshe Sinai, that this is a tradition from Moshe Rabbeinu Sinai. Shemavim b'migdosh, that in the migdosh you bring arova acheres, a different arova. So you see the Rambam's lost, besides the arova for the lulav, another arova, a different arova. Chutz ma'arova shabelulav, besides the arova lulav. Ve'ein odom yotzi dechavosem arova shabelulav. And a person does not fulfill the obligation by using arova in the lulav. Vishiura, what is the shiur the Rambam says in the arova, the additional mitzvah that you have to bring in the mikdash? Afilu ola echad bevad echad, even 1 leaf on 1 stick, no 2 sticks, no olin bach on 1 stick. So the Rebbe says from the Loshen Rambam, from the precise language of the Rambam, arova acheres. This is a different arova. It says clearly, chutz ma'arova shebelulav, which sides the arova lulav. The ein odem yetzer, the person is not fulfilling. Is mashma, it appears, ados is nit blois abazut the pulas of ma'isa agava. It's not just an act that the person does. Notice it's an under chefzer shel arova. It's not the same arova, and you're doing something else with it, but it's entirely different chefzer shel arova. Was the far. The language is Aleph, Einotum Yetzi Dechavos Arova Shebelulav. Can't fulfill your Allah with the Arova and the Lulav because this is something totally different. Also, Pashtus Alosh is Lechedem Mashma. It's not just with the shaking of the Lulav that you're not late. So the Rebbe says it's Mashma. Even if you should take that Arova, you wouldn't be Yetzi. From Pashtus Alosh is Lechedem Mashma is Nit Yetzi Afilu when they're named the Arova Fneatzma. Even if you're just going to remove that arova from the lulav, you just take that arova, you're also not going to be yetzer. Nitzam mit lulav. So Rambam isn't talking about that you're taking it with the lulav and that's why you're not yetzer. It's mashma enelim yetzer barova shebelulav. Just using that arova of the lulav, you're not going to be yetzer. Beis, and number 2, shiura afilu alechad bevad echad kinal. It's 1 Allah, 1 bad. It means that it's a total separate mitzvah. So in machlokes the Gemara al pizeh kumtois. So according to this, it turns out as loit shitas haramba b'shteit in them the machlokes zwischen Abba Shol and the Rabbanan. According to the Rambam's view, this is the argument between Abba Shol and the Rabbanan in the Gemara over there, whether whether you need 2 or 1. Abba Shol learned up arova shebemigdosh. Abba Shol learns because Abba Shol learns what is the source for the arova in the migdosh. Fun arvei nachal. It says in a plural. Willows of the nachal. Ksiv. Shtayim means 2. Achas la lulav, achas la migdosh. 1 for the lulav, 1 for the migdosh. So he has a pasuk. So they learn from the same pasuk. So they need to be fitting the same pasuk. Und der Rabbanon sagen, and the Rabbanon say Hilchas Gemidlah. So halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Now this is halacha l'Moshe Sinai. It's a halacha l'Moshe Sinai. As we eser netiyas v'nisuch hamayim. This the Chachamim made a special allowance to leave eser netiyas to work the fields on erev shvis, which is midrabanan. The same thing is the libation of mayim that we do on the mizbeach instead of the wine, which is all halacha l'Moshe Sinai. So what's the chiluk? Loit Abba Shol, according to Abba Shol, vibal the mitzvah sarov is ongezogt geworden und wird abgelernt vom Posik Arvi Nachal, since the mitzvah for Arova, the special Arova, is instructed. And we learn it from the verse Arvi Nachal, Vashteit Mefurish Barova Shebelulov, which explicitly is talking about the Arova, which is the Lulav. Is there Chefza von der Arova Shebe Mikdosh, then the object of the Arova the Mikdosh, der selber wie bei der Arova Shel Belulov, is the same as the Arova in the Lulav. Nor melernt blois arois, but all what we learn as is a besondere mitzvah. It's a separate mitzvah, a kolponim pu'ula, a separate act by Arova. But it's basically one and the same. Aber die Rabbanon, was halten Arove Shebe Mikdosh is Allah L'Moshe Sinai, they say that Arove in the Mikdosh is passed on by tradition, the law that's given to Moshe Sinai. Und in Yonah v'chiyuva hat nicht kein Sheiches zum Posik Arve Nochel, and the idea of that Arove has no connection, no obligation to the Pasuk Arvi Nachal, which is by the Arova Shebelulav, can. So therefore, Daf Oiskom. So then it turns out, or should turn out, as the mitzvah Arova hot oichanander geder, then this mitzvah is another definition, another chefza canal, it's another object, like we said before. So if you learn it from the same pasuk as you learn the mitzvah of lulav, the Arova, together with the four species, so then we should say it's the same mitzvah, but expanded in a different area. But if it comes, but the halacha should be the same. But if it's halacha l'Moshe Sinai, like the Rambam writes, so then it's a totally different thing. It's not connected to the arovas of the lulav, and it's its own gedorim and its own halacha. And the Rebbe wants to bring out the uniqueness, according to Pnimis Inyonim, of the Arove. Not only Arove as one of the four species of the lulav, but also Arove as a standalone in the Arove that we bring for Hoshana Raba, which is the point of the Rebbe in the Sichos for Hoshana Raba, to bring about the advantage and the greatness of this mitzvah. The Rebbe will explain. Dalet, der Biur Pnimi in dem was mitzvahs Arova is a besonder Sug Chefza with the Arova Shebelulav. So what is the inner explanation? Why is it? What does it mean in the inner matter of things that the mitzvah Arova is a separate category than the Arova of the Lulav? So we'll first understand, the Frierdiker Rebbe explains what the Arova is, and then we'll see how the Arova by itself. What is the idea of an Arova? My father-in-law, the Rebbe, says, as Arova, is heim anoshim pshutim. Arova is simple people. The kiyum mitzvahs hurak b'emunah pshuta, they do the mitzvahs only with simple faith. V'yesh lemer. So the Rebbe says this seems to be like just saying that, but this brings in a whole deep understanding of the Arova, what the Arova is. Yesh loymar, as the mit bringt sich arois an oimek, that with this we bring out, the Friedrich brings out a depth in the Divrei HaMedrash HaYiduim, in the known words of the Medrash. We know it's known as the Dalet Minim Zainen Keneged the Dalet Sugim Funid, that the four different species, they correspond to four different categories of Jews. Esrei, when we talk about the Esrei, Ze Yesh Boi Tam Yesh Boreach. Esrei has both. It tastes, has a good taste, it also has a good smell. So that would correspond to Yisrael, Sheyesh Bem Torah, Yesh Bem Maisim Tovim. They have both Torah, a good taste, and they also have a good smell. They have good deeds. So that's the Esrik. The Medrash further says, what is the lulav? The kapis tmorim. Yesh by tam vein by reach. That has a taste and doesn't have a smell. Of course, we're not talking about the lulav itself. We're talking about the dates. The dates have a taste. The tmorim have a taste, and there is no smell there. So that would represent Yisrael. That represents Yidden that have Torah. So they have a good smell, but they don't have Maisim Tovim, so they have a taste, but they don't have Maisim Tovim, they don't have a smell. Hadas, but then you have the Hadas, Yesh Beireyach Vein Beitam. The myrtle has a smell, smells good, but it doesn't have a taste. That would be Israel representing Yidden, Sheyesh Mehem Maisim Tovim, Vein Bem Torah. Those Yid that have good deeds, but they don't have Torah. And then the fourth category would be Arova Zu, Ein Botam Vein Boreach. The willow has no taste and has no smell. Yisrael, Shein Bem Loy Torah V'lo Maisim Tovim, is talking about a Yid, doesn't have Torah and Maisim Tovim at all. So, if you learn the Medrash Bepashtus, we're talking about a Yid who's not observant. That is called an Arova. But the Rebbe said it a totally different thing. The Rebbe said the Arova is the Anoshim Pshutim, that their fulfillment is with Ramona Pshuta. The Rebbe says, of course, we're not talking over here in the Medrash about people that are not doing Torah mitzvahs. But we're talking about what motivates them to do Torah mitzvahs. It's not, and the Arava is someone whose motivation is not intellect and is not Maisim Torah. His motivation is Amunah Pshuta, simple faith. Let's see what the Rebbe explains. For Shitchias Loshen HaMedrash Kumtois, from the simple language of the Medrash on the superficial level, it turns out as Davke Esrig is Merames of them Sug Eden Vasom Beidinyonim, that it's only the Esrig that hints to the category of Yid that have both matters, Torah and Maisim Torah. Mash Enkein by the andere Sugim felt ein Prat, as opposed to by the other categories, there is one part missing, one detail missing. Torah or the Kima mitzvahs, either they're missing Torah or they're missing fulfillment of mitzvahs, or the Rezas fell in Beidinyon, or they're missing both. That would be the simple end, but that's not the way the Rebbe explains the Frierdiker Rebbe. In them is so my father-in-law, the Rebbe explains in this, Verzog dort, the Kol Yisrael him shovim be'inyan kiyum Torah mitzvahs. All Yidden are the same, are equal, as far as the matter of observance of Torah mitzvahs. There's no different categories of here. They're all equal. Das heißt, which means, as by the Aleph Sugim, This means that by all categories, by alle dalet sugim, is the other kiyum for Beidin Yonim. There is the observance of both. Kiyum HaTorah mitzvahs. We're not talking about one of them. Limud Yediyas HaTorah, the study and knowledge of Torah, on Kiyum HaMitzvahs. And that's not that one has, both, all of them have it. Via Shloimar, and the Rebbe says, we have to say so. We have to say that we're not talking about people of Pashat not learning Torah, doing mitzvahs, shari their sug from lulav. Because if you are a lulav, which means limud atayra kiteboyi, you're saying that the tmorim that they have a date, the dates have a taste. So what are we going to say? He doesn't do mitzvahs. So how could he be learning Torah properly? Because the category kiteboyi is mekayim mitzvahs. He has to do mitzvahs. Hayoisas limud mevle ma'isa, because learning brings to ma'isa. Und der was tut ma'asim tovim, and then on the other hand, one who does ma'asim tovim mitzvahs, hat yediyas haTorah. He has to have knowledge of Torah. Because how could he do mitzvahs without knowing what the Torah zu wissen, wie zu bekayim sein mitzvahs, to know how to observe mitzvahs? So from there it's understood. I've been a them suga rova. Also, one who's in the category of a rova, as if by the Eden from them sug is okay mamit Torah mitzvah poil. Also by that those Yidden, there is the actual fulfillment of Torah mitzvahs. They study Torah and they do mitzvahs in actuality. So what does it mean? The medrash. Now the pirush hapnimi in divrei hamedrashis, the inner meaning what the medrash means, as chiluk bashtet in them oifun ve'eches von zeir kiyum Torah mitzvahs, that the difference consists of in the style and the quality of their observance of Torah mitzvahs. Torah is verbunden mit malas hasegel. Torah is tied to the advantage of the intellect. Umaisim tovim are tied to malas hamidus, the advantage of the emotion, the characters. Und das is the chiluk zwischen the dalet sugim. So that becomes the difference between these four categories. Esreg is meramis of the Eden. Esreg hints of those Jews was in Zeir Kiyman mitzvahs. When they do mitzvahs, is those sai milas haseichel. They have both. They have the advantage of intellect on sai milas hamidus. They have the advantage of the emotion. In lulav zayne merumes the Eden. In lulav are hinted those Eden. Was haben beiker milas haseichel. There's a taste and without a smell. They have mainly the advantage of intellect. And in hodos beiker milas hamidus. And the hodos mainly the ones who have the advantage of the emotion. That represents the simple people. But since they came in their fulfillment, felt they're lacking in both, in the advantage of the intellect and the advantage of the midas. They're doing it only with simple face. That's how the Friedrich Rebbe would explain this matter. Is from them gufa verstandig. So from this itself, we understand as Euchen Suga Robe is da Amaila Legabe de andere Gimel Minim. That also in the category of Arava, there is an advantage, even relative to the other three species. Ukidu the word from Baal Shem Tov, as the saying, the known saying of the Baal Shem Tov, as the pshitas for nanoshim pshutim, that simplicity of the simple people, is ein zach mit pshitas ha'atzmos, is one thing with the simplicity of atzmos, of the essence of the Ein Sof of Hashem. So while the Rebbe brings down, in order to understand what the Arava is a category by itself, the Rebbe first explains what the idea of Arava. He brings down what the Friedrich Rebbe said, that the Arava are Yidden that do with the Muna Pshuta, includes all Yidden. So unlike what we would learn the Medrash on our own, that is talking about people that only do Torah, only do mitzvahs, that's not shaykhs, because to learn Torah, Torah will lead you to mitzvahs. If you're doing mitzvah, you need to learn Torah. So as the Rebbe explains it, it means what's the main? Torah is mainly intellectual. Mitzvahs are mainly emotional. So this represents the categories which they're doing the mitzvahs mainly, some doing it with both with emotion and intellect. Some do it only with emotion, some do it only with intellect. And the simple people do it just with simple faith. And we know that that simplicity is not necessarily a lower level, but on the contrary, that connects with the Pshitas Asma. So now we've elevated the level of Arava to a high level. And the Rebbe says that we can feel, and it's mirrored, this advantage of Arava, of the simplicity. And it's even more going to be evident in the Arava that we bring ourselves. First, the Arava as it's one of the four species, and then the Arava as we bring by itself. That Ilu Hanal in them Sug in from Arava, that above advantage in the category of Yidden, which are called Arava Yidden, simple people that serve with simple faith. Was Dafke in Zay Driktsuchois der Inyan Apshitus, that only in them expresses the idea of the Pshitus of Atzmus, spiegelt sich euch up euch in der Arava Kipshuta, that mirrors in the literal, the Arava. As is Yedua der Biur Hatam, it's known the explanation. Why do we take Pavos the mitzvah lekachtem lachem b'shtei davke from the vier minim? Why does it consist specifically of these four species? Weil in zei is niker v'nirgash the tchuna von avdos. Each one of these species, you can tell in them that characteristic of unity. But that unity has different expressions. And the way it's expressed by Arava is the highest level of unity. Lulav is unity, is olav kefusim. Its leaves are all tied. Alle seine Blätter, seine Zenamigin, they're all together. These achdus in unity. The lulav's leaves grow tight one another. So that's a level of unity. Hodos, seinen die Blättlach, klosse bechad kina. On the myrtle, the leaves, you have three growing from one stem. So that's unity, all coming from one stem. Araves werden angerufen achvena. In Aramaic, Araves were called brotherly. Why? They grow in brother. They all grow together. Lots of their Araves together. Und Esrig is dort bilon mishon l'shana. Esrig expresses unity because it strays on the tree from year to year, and it tolerates all kinds of weather. In Imver vereinigt, in the Esrig, there is united alle vier shinui avir, the all four different changes of the year, the spring, the summer, fall, and winter. They're all combined in the Esrig because the Esrig grows all year from all the different weathers. Euch von die Dalet Kufis Hoshana, the four changes in the air and the four different seasons of the year. Not only does it tolerate, it is Godel Mikulam, it grows. It's a sense of unity growing from all diversities, from all the different weathers and all the different seasons. So the fact that also physically they extend that concept of unity means that they have in themselves a closer relation to unity. That's why physically they come out that way. Das was gewisse Sachen in Welt The fact that certain items in the world have the concept of unity, although the natural entity of the world they should have had, it would seem, the characteristic of separation and differences, upirut. So this goes similarly. The Eibishter makes this against the what should be the nature into a unity of here. The worldly matters that is blocked is separate, discord. They're not together. So why do these physical items have that level of unity? That comes because in them shines the level of simplicity of above, Avdus Apshuta, the true unity. Und die Pshita shel Maila tut oif dem Yichud Minskalus, that simplicity of above, that accomplishes the unity and the inclusion in Yedna for the Firminim, in each one of these four species. As Oich Begoli, they're also openly Herzich nit as they on by Zeir Yeshus. That also where we see that we don't see so much their being themselves, their being, mitzat teva ha'olam, which is from the nature of the world. Nor Oich Zeir Bittul, you can also sense by them their self-effacement, their self-negation. Was tut oif by Zei Achdus Begoli. That accomplishes by them an open Achdus that they should be in openly united. So the Rebbe says, so therefore the physical representation of that unity represents their level of unity of Shittas connected with higher than the nature of the world, but with the Achdus of Hashem more openly. So that means that within the species itself, the fact that the Arova represents a greater level of unity, that means that it's more representative of the Achdus. Aber euch in der Tchunas Achdus von die Dalet Minim Gufa. Also within the characteristic of unity within the four species themselves, Zat Ben Achiluk, we see there's a difference. By the Gimel Minim, Esreg, Lulav, Ahodos, by the three species, Esreg and Lulav, Ahodos, is the Achdus in Yed Mifnei Atzmei. Their unity that represent is each one in their own. As in the Blätter von dem Lulav, either it's in the leaves of that Lulav, it's still one Lulav, separate from other Lulavim, but in the Lulav, there's unity. Or their Bad Hahodos Atzmam, or in that stem, that stick of the myrtle, you see them growing out. All of Kafusim, Plosa Bechadkina, their leaves are bound together, three in one stem. Now there's the esrik. So the esrik was his dor bilonid. This esrik represents the unity in themselves. Aber nicht ais achdus, but you don't have a unity from ein lulav hodos and esrik with that zweiten lulav chulum. It's not combining different lulavim, different esregim, and different. It's within the kind itself. Mashenken arova, as opposed to arova, was by ir is this achdus in them. What is the unity of arova? Was ein arova vachs be'achva be'avdus. That one arova grows with brotherly and unity with the other arovas with the other arovas. It is expressed in the unity from the different kinds. Und wie bald as the avdus ba'arova is in a breiteren Eufen wie bei the andere drei Minim. Since the unity by the arova is in a wider way than by the other three species, bis in an Eufen Hofchi von Teva ha'olam, in a way that it's opposite nature of the world, growing together, versus worldly nature is separation, was is Ba'aschalkas, und Pirut zwischen einem mit dem zweiten, which is dividing and separation from one or the other, is move on as dos is der farbos in im is meir begidlu yoser. So that's understood. That is because in the Arava shines more revealed. The pshita shalamayla viba the andere gimumim. It has the simplicity of above more than the other species. Und das ist euch der Tam. That's also the reason was the Afk by Arava is the Avdus verbunden mit seinem Namen. And here it's the name Nikra Achveno. It's called brotherly, so that unity is in the name of the Arava in the Aramaic language. But the other species, we don't call them. The name doesn't express the level of unity. So therefore, Arava, in a way, represents a higher level of unity, the Maila of Arava. So the Rebbe explains that the way the things come out in this world physically, and that's the reason why we take these species, is because they represent unity. That unity is because that means that even notwithstanding that because of the world they should be separation, but still there's unity. But all the other unities are within the lulav, within the esrog, within the hadassim. But here it's the alavis together. Therefore, it expresses a greater level of unity, and the name of it is also called Achvana. And why is that? It's connected to the fact that lulav, hadas, and the esrog have advantages. And therefore, when there is milas, it can't be really full of unity. Only arava, which is simplicity, which is pshitas, there you can say there's real unity. Vav yeshloimar as the tam hadover. The reason for this matter was that inyan ha'achdus is mer begoli by arava, that it's more open by arava, is verbunden mit dem inyan analgufa, is tied to the above idea of what the lulav hoda arava represent from the medrash. By the andere sugim lulav esrogim v'hodos v'bald, by the other categories of lulav esrogim v'hodos v'bald as jeder von sie hot in sich a maila, other mailas proteus, since each one has an advantage or has its own individualized advantages for seichel midas. Yesh beitam, the lulav means that there's a taste. Yesh beireach, that's the hodos. They have advantages. They have special advantage of greatness. Or the yesh b'ishneya, or has both the esrik. So there is advantage in the milas geluye. So then the open greatness of seichel or midas, milim of the pshitas. That's why they block, they obscure the simplicity. Shamil Maila, which is from above, Osidoinze, that exists in them. Ubemela, and therefore, of them in your Havdasubem. And therefore, also on the idea of unity, because their advantages obscure and block the Pshitus Melmaila, the Mela, of them in Havdasubem. Was them sich canal der Fun, because the unity comes from the fact that Zay is made the Pshitus Lamaila. By them, the Pshitus Lamaila brings about that brings Lamaila can be obscure. So they're take Meir the Pshitus, they're take Ian of Achdus, and they have but the fact that they have Milas can obscure that. Bizas Meken Meinen, to the extent one can think it's not because of their representing a unity, Pshitas Domailo, but you can think maybe the reason we chose them is because of their advantages. The reason that they were chosen is not to live their avdus. It's not because of their unity, nor to live their milas tam vereach, because what they have. But when we talk about the category of arov, That doesn't have any open revealed advantages. No taste and no smell. So therefore, this concept of unity is revealed and very simple and with simplicity. So it cannot be blocked. It's not blocked. So over there you see the Achdus. These as Oyser dem Tama Achdus to the extent that you can't say, oh, why did we choose the Arava? Only because there's unity. As Oyser dem Tama Achdus is talking Svara, there's no other idea. Favos the Arava is any from the Dalad Minute. Why is it one of the four species? It doesn't have any advantages. It's only because of the level of unity. While the Pshitos Atzmus is by Regoli. Over there it's open. In Ir Teva, in the nature of Arava, unafilin in Raman to the extent of its name. So that's where the real revelation of Aldus. So there is nothing to block and obscure because there's no other milah. So the real sense of Pshitos of Asmus is Tafki in the Arava. The other things, you can make a mistake. Maybe they have an advantage because of Tam, Reyach, Seichel, Midas. But here, there is only thing is the unity. That's why you see the Gilui of the Pshitas Asmus in this Arava. Similar to we find the distinction by Yid. Every Yid has a part of Hashem of above Mamash, which is tied with Pshitas Atzmus. We're not going to say that every Yid, the Baal Shem Tov says Anoshim Pshutim, because by Anoshim Pshutim, there's nothing to block it. Every Yid's Nashama is verbunden mit Pshitas Atzmus. Setman Ober, as by the Yidden welche sein in the Reich, in Seichel Midas, that Yidden who are rich, they have a wealth of intellect and emotion, so their open advantages of their intellect and emotion, mailim of their amunah pshuta, that blocks, obscures that simple faith. The pshitus utmimis shemitzad that simplicity and innocence from the essence of the soul, which is the chelik of kamil mal mamish, you don't see it. Davke by anoshim pshutim, specifically by simple people, which don't have any revealed advantages for seichel midas, intellect, emotion, is by zay the amunah pshuta begoli, by them the simple faith is open. That is open because there is nothing to block it. Because their pshitus is canal, einzach me pshitus atzma. Their simplicity is one thing with pshitus atzmas. Just like by Yidden, where do we tell? Where can you see the mile of pshitus is by anoshim pshutim? Because by other people it may be obscured because of their greatness. Same thing is by the species, the lulav, the arava, the lulav and the esrog and the others. Over there, you don't see that level of unity like you see it by the arava, because the arava, there's no mistake. It's all about that level of unity of pshitus atzmus. So now, once we know what arava is, we're also going to understand the special din of arava. Alpizeh is separate of the arava rule. Alpizeh is euch move on der Eiftu and Inyan Meyuchad. You understand the novelty and the special idea for mitzvahs arava shebemigdosh of der arava shebelulav. The mitzvah of the arava that we did on Hoshana Raba, in the Mikdash, which is even today, makes sure to have that mitzvah of the mitzvah of arava shebelulav. It's different and it's greater than the arava shebelulav, because in the end of the day, the arava shebelulav gets put together with the others. This arava is a standalone. The arava shebelulav. Even though in it there is no revealed advanced greatness, on the far herzig and near bieser to malus ardus. And that's why in the Rabbis you can feel with more force that advantage of its unity. Gedelin ba'achvanot, that they grow with unity. But yet, von deswegen, bald is ihr mechaber, mitzaref, zusammen mit die andere drei minim, since you connect them and you combine them together with the other three species. Because they were a mitzvah, you make one mitzvah of the different together with the other species. The far is the inyan hapshitus shabozeh. Shabo. Therefore, the idea of the pshitus that is in the arava was completely gilu davke durch heder hamailas canal, which only comes openly when there's no milas, nit betaharosi. That's not in its purity. Durch dem igud v'chibru with the andere minim, through the tying it and connecting it with the other species, also the arava gets advantages. Arava shebemigdosh, supposed to arava besamigdosh is mitzvosu vinyona bazundra arava. The arava migdosh is mitzvah. The idea is a separate arava, not connected to no other species. But hot nit ken kesher v'chibur mit anderen minim v'sugim. It has no connection, no tie, and no connection with other types, other categories. Bali maila, with advantages. There's no advantages by itself. Das is azam mitzvah welches is nito kein helem mitzad milas. It's such a mitzvah that has no block because of that. There's no advantages there. Pshitas atzmus steht nirvagoli, and the simplicity of atzmus is standing there openly. So the Rebbe explains here that the real advantage of arava that you can feel is really only when you do the arava as a standalone. When you do the arava as a standalone, then the arava really represents no advantages, doesn't even connect any advantages. And therefore, that's where you can really see the Pshitas Ha'atzmas. And the Yesh Loimar, the Rebbe adds, we can say, Ados is the Tam Hadeyes. This is the reason for the opinions. As Bishas Mizmakif Shem of Pa'omim, the Mizbeach B'Shayna Raba. So the opinions say that when you circle 7 times the Mizbeach B'Shayna Raba, is the Hakofa Blois Mitten Lulav Uminov. He says that's only done with the lulav and its species. Unit with the arava, not with the arava. It's a separate mitzvah. They say you're going to circle without the aravas. And their far is arava ain't the that's why we take it by itself. Not connected. There's no other milas, not even connected with other. As the Rambam writes, a person cannot fulfill the obligation of the lulav. Also, the shir is not similar to the shir of the lulav. It's standalone. It's not connected with the arava that can connect to the other meaning. Over there, it's shloisha olim lachim. Over there, you need at least to have 3 leaves must be moist. But over here, it's even 1 leaf in 1 stick. That's enough. Was dos badait, that shows the fact that it's 1, as is nit ken achdus was is zunev gestalt from protim, nor achdus pshuta. It's not a unity that's put together. It's 1. There's only 1 stick and there's only 1 leaf. It's not a unity that's put together from. This is the ultimate achdus pshuta. Ches. And now we will understand, based upon the Rebbe says from Likutei, that the simcha, which the Torah writes, smachta b'chagecha, is not as great as the simcha that comes in Simchas Beis HaShe'eva, which we learn from the extra words in the Pasuk. And even that is not the same as Simchas Torah, which there's not even only a minhag, to show us that the simpler and the more greater the simcha, the higher it is, the less sources we have for this. That's why we learn it from Allah Sinai and not from a pasuk. That is the arava. That is the greatness of this level, because it comes to the highest level. So therefore, it comes to Allah Sinai. Let's look inside. Ches. Apizay's move on. Based on this, we understand. Why the Rava in the Mikdash is a tradition from Moshe Sinai. And not something which is clear. It's not only is it not explicit in the Torah about this Arava, it's not something which you learn from a pasuk in Teresh B'Ksav. It's Allah Moshe Sinai. This is al derech hamavur b'Likutei Torah Megdam Chiluk. Similar as explained in the Torah about the distinctions between Nisach Hamayim b'Shiva Simei Achag, the libation of the water, which was done during the 7 days of Sukkot, was Allah Moshe Sinai. That's Allah Moshe Sinai. Or Nisach Hayayin, and the libation of wine was his Meforish B'Teresh B'Ksav Behedya, which is very clearly articulated in the written Torah. In many places, the Torah talks about the libation of the wine. And the Alter Rebbe explained, as Nisach HaMayim nemtzich von hechere madrege v'nisach hayayin. The libation of the water comes from a higher level than the libation of the wine. Therefore, can and nitarop kommen in ksav. It cannot come down in the Torah, in atzir oishis teresh ksav, in a shape of letter teresh ksav. Kibavur Baruch has explained over there at length. Al derech zeh is the mile from the Raba sheba mikdash if Raba shebelulav. Similarly, is the advantage of the willow that's in the mikdash over the willow that's in the lulav. Was kommt nit arop in atzivim beferish b'teresh b'ksav. The arova of the mikdash does not come a very clear instruction in the written Torah. We don't find it. But das nimmt sich von azam madrege. This comes from such a place was is hecher from kumen the degilu in Torah b'ksav etzir. This is a higher place that cannot come revealed in the written Torah, in shaped by the letters of the Torah. Was benefesh ha'odam, talking about the human soul, is das verbunden mit azacha ahicha madrega. This is such a high level in their neshama, in the soul, the level of this harova, the mitzvah, was is vereinzig mit Eibishter, which is united with the Eibishter. That's where it touches. It's pshitus hanefesh. It's the simple of this soul. Was medarf ha'id nit mitzave zayin if them beferish. A yid does not need to be instructed clearly in a way of very clear letters in the written Torah. No, it's passed along a tradition of Allah Sinai, and that's why it comes to Allah Sinai. Just like there is an advantage to the Nisuch Hamayim that it's not written in the Torah, it's on Allah Sinai because it comes from a higher place. The same thing is the arova, which is brought of the mizbech, is Allah Sinai. It cannot come down in the words of the Torah. It touches the etzem hanefesh, which is mushash in atzmus. Test. The fi hanal is move on. So based on the above, we understand as the inyan from arova bisman hazeh, that the idea of arova nowadays, Hoshana Raba, we take that arova. Was noitlen I saw nor by Yemashvi, we take it only on the 7 days. Und was is bisman hazeh afilu nit keninyan from Allah Moshe Sinai. But now it's not even Allah Moshe Sinai because that wasn't the time of the mizbeach. Nor minhag neviim. This is just a tradition of neviim. Ubefrat lo idem pirush b'rishonim, especially as the nevi, as the interpretation, the rishonim as minhag neviim, make nit as it higus ha'om nor. It doesn't mean it's a minhag that they introduced and let the people know as Minek Shenogu came. Meaning the V means they did it. And the other people, the people saw them and they did it on their own. It wasn't, they didn't instruct them to do it. It's a Minek Nevim that did it. And so that means it's not even an instruction. It's just a custom of them. So this is not only is it not a Lach Lameshim Sinai, it's only a minig and then a minig Nevi'im, and it may not even be a minig that they told us to do, but we do it on our own. Is those gufa bavais? This itself proves as bis primis is in achechem and mitzvahs arova shebimikdash that the inner it's even higher than the arova mikdash. Was is Lach Lameshim Sinai? In the mikdash, at least the Lach Lameshim Sinai. Similar to what's explained in Likutei Torah, about that kofes shmini atzeres. Not only is it not written in the Torah, and not only is it not halacha l'meishim Sinai, but it's not even written. It's only a minute, like the Aravis Hashainis on Shana Raba, as a Zainen. That they're even higher than the libation of water, which is Allah Messina, that at least is Allah Messina. And here it's a minute, which is not even Allah Messina. But in the Indian for Minag Yisrael, the idea of Minag Yisrael, those was even the fact that Yidden conduct themselves such, weist, das ist verbunden mit Scheurisch von Neshamas Yisrael. That is tied to the root of the Neshamas Yisrael. Was is Kodmul Torah, comes before Torah, it's not even Torah instruction. Hecher von Torah. Mitzadem was the Pshitas from Eden, is ein Zach mit Pshitas Atzmas. That's the simplicity of Yidden, is one with the simplicity of the Atzma with Hashem himself. Veren is Eider hert euch die Inyonim. So by Yidden, our sense also those matter was ein Hecher von Nimshach werden Nichsav Tzir. They're too higher to come down in the written, in shape, in writing. They can still, they know it still. They don't need it to be written. Behind the Chochmosei, Retzonis Baruch, sein in Nizgal geworden in Torah Mitzvah, und actually Livre Sofrim. And that's even higher than the Chochmah of Hashem and His will comes down in the Torah or Divrei Sofrim, even with Rabbanan. This is even higher. Was they do it without any instruction, no command, anything at all. They're just doing it on their own. That's because of the essence of the neshama that is mushrash in atzmos. So when Yidden conduct themselves such, because this is a tradition, do the Shyness, do the Aravis, werd aufgetan, adosel werden teure. Minig Yisrael teure. Minig Yisrael werd teure hu kibur mokmachar. As explained there, that becomes teure after we do the tradition. So Alpizeh Yud. Yesh levayer, then primis apirish in them was Yemarova falt netois b'Shabbos. We can explain the inner meaning that the day of Arova, Shana Raba cannot follow on Shabbos. Afal piyad bepashtus ubechitzonius is their time was the reason why, because gam achshav on a mechashvin lemikla yem Arova b'Shabbos. That the reason why nowadays we don't calculate that the Arova should be come in Shabbos, as the Tosha says in Sukkah, there kedez only bottle and mitilas Arova, so as not to negate and take away the Arava, because people may not do it if we don't do it on Shabbos. If it's going to fall on Shabbos, we're not going to do it. But in the inner meaning is the Fal Arava is geringer, because Arava is lighter. By Arava, umischoshes as osi lipikpukeba. So in the Pashto sense, as Tosfos explained, since Arava is a lesser value, not as strict, and therefore we worry also if people will question if you don't do it, they're not going to do it. And the Farat was gedacht mechazik sein. That's why they needed to strengthen it, which is also chizuk levrei yoshim shel Torah, that needs more force of the Rabbana more than even Torah. So that's the simple reason. But yes, Loimer has bepnimis is the time that in the inner the reason is to them Basarova is verbunden mit der hecheren madrege. That the reason is because Arova is higher level, the high level. But in der Arova was is minig a Nevi'im drikt sich ois, because in the Arova, which is the minig of the Nevi'im, it expresses pshitus atzmi b'ta'arosei, the pure simplicity of atzmus. The Rebbe is does be'oifen as mis alamol yed the yor mekayim. Therefore, we need to do it every year. Mitzvahs Arova be'oifen shove on King Shinui. There's no change because this is all connected to atzmus. And thus is an inyan from chizuk mitzad atzmai. That's a strength on its own. Comes. It's not a minhag. It's not even a din. It's not an instruction. Bizas the spoiled is man in Welt to the extent that it impacts in time and world as based in his Maber Chadoshim, that they make the month leap years, or Mizmesad Kvis Luchas, the Holashonim, that you set up the Luchas for all the years, Ba'ifim, in a way as only honoring the Netilo Sarova B'Yemarova, not to touch taking the Rava B'Yemarova, because that's so important. It's such a high level, and we need to do this every year. So we change around, that we change time. It impacts the time just because we want to make sure that we're going to do this every year, because that reaches a level which is higher than any of the other levels. This is Sichos Likutei Hoshana Raba Tovshin Daled Mem.